This video accompanies the revision mind maps for Health and the People. Before we go any further, I want to make it clear that not everything in 1,000 years of history is covered in these mind maps, and what I've tried to do is pick out some of the most important areas of the module that you need to remember. Please, just like with the knowledge organiser, don't think that this is a cure-all, that if you have all the information on these mind maps, then you're just ready for the Health and the People exam. It's not that simple. This is part of, not all of, your revision. So I would suggest that this is part of how you prepare, but this is not a replacement for practicing past paper questions. Okay, let's have a look at each of the slides. So, Medicine Stands Still, part 1 of the course. We'll start in the top left-hand corner, the teachings of Hippocrates and Galen. Please remember that you need to know about their theories rather than their lives, because this course begins in the medieval period. So you would not get a question on Hippocrates, the significance of Hippocrates, or the significance of Galen, but you might get a question on the significance of their ideas in the medieval period, because they're not alive in our course, but their ideas dominate. There's a section after that on the importance of Islamic medicine. I seem to have broken the slide. That's better. So there's a section on causes of disease, and you need to sort of match the symbol to the cause. But please remember as well, if you've got the space to add notes on add notes to give detail. So, for example, you can see there one of the supposed causes of disease was God. If you just simply write the word God, that's not really effective revision. If you then go on to explain the importance of sin in the Christian faith and how people believe that illness and disease was viewed by many as a punishment for sins of an individual or of the group, then you're starting to make some better revision notes. You can see there's a section after that on treatments. So that actually, the images of a medieval church. So you need to tell me of how churches and monasteries were involved in providing medical care. There are two more there as well, but that's not all of the treatments. As one example, trepanning isn't there, so that is a treatment of the time. Like I said, these mind maps, there's not room for everything, so you might want to add your own notes to this. There's a section on caregivers, and again, just briefly explain the sort of services that these people offered. And then finally, in the bottom left-hand corner, medieval hospitals. What sort of treatment were people getting in the medieval period in hospitals? Okay, part 2 of the course. The beginnings of change is, I think this whole part of the course is a debate on how much was changing and to what extent did old ideas persist. So you can see the first thing right at the top, continuity versus change, which ideas persisted. The belief in the four humours continued in this period. If we look at Charles II on his deathbed and how he was treated, he was let blood. He was essentially given a medicine containing mercury, which would have poisoned him. So there's still a belief, for example, in the four humours. There's still a belief in the role that God can play in the cause of disease. But also there are some significant changes, which you can see there. So there are some key individuals, new methods and new inventions. What you can see on the new inventions is the first microscope and the printing press. And again, if you can explain how those inventions are helping to identify issues in medicine and how to fix them, then even better. With the new methods, we can see James Phipps, the first patient of Edward Jenner's smallpox vaccine. Bottom right, there's a section on 3 key individuals, which you will find in part 2, Beginnings of Change. A section on quacks. In the bottom left, there's a section on the government's response to the plague of 1665 compared with the Black Death. And then finally, in the top left-hand corner, new hospitals. I've put St Bartholomew's there. If you know of any more hospitals founded in that period, add them to your list. And then what notes do you have on so-called specialist hospitals? Are there any certain areas of medicine specifically being treated in one place by this time? Okay, part 3, a revolution in medicine, and there's so much change in this 150 to 200 years or so. So we'll start in the top left-hand corner with the key individuals. You can see there's a section on Pasteur and Koch and the impact that they had on the growth of vaccines. There's Nightingale, Seacole, Simpson, Snow, Chadwick, all sorts of key individuals that you can give and improve your knowledge on. Like I said, if you just write these people's names, it's not going to be very helpful to you. But if you briefly summarise what they did, then that is helpful. Improvements to surgery. I've got a section there on antiseptics and anaesthetics. So the prevention of pain in the case of anaesthetics and the prevention of infection with antiseptics. The role of the government changing and this idea of a more active government, not quite to the level that we know today. And then finally, the impact of the Industrial Revolution. And I want you to think really about the impact on the population. You know, these booming towns that the population grows quite rapidly. What is housing like? What's medical treatment like? How is public health getting worse in this period of time? And as a case study, you could look at cholera, and you could look at John Snow's reporting into the causes of cholera, and how he used mapping techniques to figure out the cause of the 1854 outbreak. And finally, modern medicine, and there's so much you could mention here. I mean, if part 3 was a revolution in medicine, then there's been even greater change in part 4 of the course. So changes to technology, I've listed 2 there. So how the discovery of DNA and X-rays, but you could take that further. You could look at things like MRI scanning as a better example of X-rays. I talk about technology with surgery as well later on, and keyhole and robotic surgery over on the right hand side. There's a section for war and the improvements made in the First and Second World War. I'm thinking about things like blood transfusions, the concept of donating blood. You could look at plastic surgery, because early examples of plastic surgery weren't for cosmetic purposes necessarily. It was to deal with people who'd been significantly disfigured on the battlefield. And again, you could look at how plastic surgery has developed. There's a section on the NHS which I think is hugely important for this century. I mean, a true revolution in medicine there. Antibiotics. So I've got a section on the 3 people who are sort of credited with developing the use of antibiotics. But I've also added a section there on antibiotic resistance, because the overprescription and overuse of antibiotics has meant that many diseases have actually developed and adapted to those antibiotics. One example, amongst many others, is gonorrhea. You might hear in the press a lot of stories about this super gonorrhea, and essentially what they mean is that the illness, the virus is the infection is now not responsive to antibiotic treatment. It isn't being damaged by it. So the overuse of antibiotics has led to antibiotic resistance, which is a significant challenge in modern medicine. Separate from the NHS, in the bottom right after surgery, I've got a section on the role of the government. And the reason why I think it's separate from the NHS is we can look at public health drives, we can look at campaigns that the government has put out to reduce sugar consumption, laws that the government has passed with things like the ban on smoking in public places because of the dangers of secondary smoking. You could even look at the role of the government in its response to the coronavirus pandemic, and policies such as such as lockdowns, both national and regional. And then finally, modern challenges at the bottom as well. And there's so many things you could talk about there. You could talk about how an ageing population is creating new challenges for the NHS. Illnesses such as diabetes and heart disease are becoming more prevalent due to an ageing population, but also we've got a situation where the NHS is becoming increasingly costly, and the debates over how the NHS should be funded. There's lots that I haven't mentioned here for modern medicine because there is so much to mention. Like I said, these mind maps are a good starting point, but it's not the be all and end all. It's a good place for your revision to begin, but it will not be something that gives you all the answers. So use it, but use it wisely. Don't rely simply on these. Use it as part of your revision, not all of it.